Welcome to the Radar Chronicles.
Hey there, Leith Anderson together with the professor.
And he's the mad scientist. This is week 7. Thanks for joining us. We had a great week.
It was. We changed the focus this week. Turning from the concept of really making a modification to your swing to turning to training. And so that really put kind of a different flavor to the whole event. Instead of looking for like the long ball, we're looking for consistency this time.
Right. And this is really interesting because what it does is, to me, it marks a new paradigm in instruction and in golf. It's the difference between teaching and training. In the first few weeks with the driver, we were really focused on the teaching aspect of it. In other words, most of the guys who were hitting golf balls did not have the right swing path, angle of attack, or club face, and so we were teaching them, in a sense, to have the right numbers.
Because with those fundamentals being upside down, they had no chance ever to be satisfied.
No, and there's no point in training for fundamentals that don't work.
And we found it's not that hard to change either. So, well then let's go do it.
So this week marked a shift in what we were doing as we shifted from teaching to training, because we also shifted to wedges. So the last 2 weeks here of our study, we're going to be working just on wedges, and everybody was in the realm where their swing was okay from a wedge standpoint to make. So we didn't have to do the teaching part of it to change them on their swing to make a different wedge swing.
Yeah, making solid enough contact, once in a while a little bit on the steep side, but you could say, hey, that's 12 degrees down, doesn't need to be quite like that. You can shallow it out a little bit, and they like that. So yeah.
So just minor. But I think the other thing that we shifted to today, which is a really important concept, is the whole idea of consistency. So when you're working on the teaching aspect of it, whether someone is teaching you or you're teaching yourself or you're working on any kind of a swing change, then you're not necessarily focused on consistency. But that's the one thing that everybody wants. How do I be more consistent?
So we're looking for the holy grail of the whole business. It's how to hit that ball into a tighter pattern, how to be more consistent. So now, what is the holy grail? Doesn't that have to do with a certain swing you're looking for?
Exactly, and that was what we coached our guys on this week. So we took their baseline data with their wedges, and we showed each one of them the maximum yardage that they hit with their wedge, the minimum yardage, and then what we called the playing yardage. And to a man, I'd have to say, every single one of them was disappointed with their playing yardage.
Oh, it's always so disappointing when you think you're 5 yards or 10 yards longer than you really are.
Exactly.
Probably 10 was pretty average.
But the way we explain it to them was, look, you need to know your maximum, your minimum, and your playing yardage, because there are going to be times when you need to step on that wedge a little bit and get an extra yard or two out, or back off on it a little bit to take a couple of yards off. That's part of the essence of feel. So what we wanted to do was say, look, here's your number.
So the whole point is, you've got to have that swing that's repeatable, that you make on balance, and that comes out the same way time after time. That's consistency.
Yeah, that's consistency, and that's what training is all about. So that's why I really liked what we did here today. Now we set up a couple of different scenarios for them. For instance, we had them hit down towards a target, but the target was several hundred yards away, so they weren't hitting to a specific target.
Yeah.
And we gave them their number. Let's say on a full swing wedge they were hitting it, their playing yardage was 93. So what we asked them to do was make a swing and see how close they could get to 93. And what we measured, and what we can see on the Flightscopes, is their side to side dispersion, left to right, and their top to bottom dispersion, their long versus short dispersion. And then what we saw happen, which was the really cool part of it, is the more they hit their 10-ball sets with these wedges, the tighter that dispersal pattern became, and that's exactly what we were looking for.
So we're looking at the circle that those golf balls are falling down in, and we want that to get tighter and tighter. And sure enough, by not stepping on it to try to hit your maximum yardage, all of a sudden you repeat the swing, you hit it into a tighter band, and that's the consistency. And
there you are, definition of consistency, and that's what every player wants.
So, do we have proof of that?
Absolutely. We're going to show that. We'll show some graphics and show the dispersal patterns and what they look like. That's the whole idea of doing the study, right? Prove what you have. So So I think this was a really interesting transition, and I think it's cool to really start pointing out a whole new category in golf instruction, if you would, and that's the training aspect of it. And I think it's really important, and I counsel people on this all the time. You know, if you go to the range and you're going to work on your game, you know, don't spend more than 50% of your time working on the teaching aspect of it, the swing mechanics side of it, the you know, changing the motion side of things. Spend at least 50% of your time dialing in what you've got. In other words, working on the performance part, or as we're now saying, the training part.
Well, now, and we've also now found from just this last couple of weeks, 2 of our guys they're pricing units. They just say that it's just not worth practicing without having radar behind them.
Well, that's because, number one, they're starting to see the results on the course.
Yeah.
Their scores are coming down, they're having shorter putts, they're hitting more greens, and so what they realized as from the study, as you say, is let's have a meaningful practice. And the only way to have a meaningful practice is to get meaningful data. So and that's what we get with our Flightscope.
So the way we get this whole thing started is we invite players to come in, spend a couple hours with us, optimize their driver, make that as good as they can, and then with the whole idea that there's going to be another 5 or 10 hours worth of work that you just are going to want to do right now.
Well, sure, because you're going to want to cover all the different parts of your game. So you want to look at your driver and optimize the driver. You're going to want to look at your wedges, certainly your scoring wedges, and optimize those. Find your playing yardage, and then also learn a partial shot, a 3/4 shot, we call it, with the wedges. But you also need to look at your mid-iron approach. That's a whole category. We discovered from the last couple sessions, long irons is a whole...
Dangerous.
Yeah, that requires a pretty solid investment of time to get to be consistent about those. Then you have fairway metals and you have hybrids, and once you're through with all of that, that's a curricula for going through a whole training program.
And with each one has a slightly different perfect shot.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The idea is find your perfect shot and practice that.
So one of the cool things that we observed this week is one of our guys in our study came back and showed me a little piece of paper. He pulled it out of his pocket, showed me a piece of paper that he had that had his minimum yardage, his maximum yardage, his playing yardage, and his miss for every shot. So in other words, if he's got a 150-yard shot, he goes, pulls it out, looks at it, he knows that that's his 8-iron, and it's 2 yards short of his ideal, so he can back off a little from his playing yardage. But he also, with that 8-iron, he has a tendency to miss 5 yards left.
So he aims right.
So he aims 5 yards to the right, takes 2 yards off, and hits it close to the now he's got a birdie putt.
What information will do when it turns into knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. So that's some of the cool, and this is why they're coming back and they're saying, I don't see any point in practicing anymore without having one of these radars. It's not, otherwise I'm just guessing. Now I walk away and I know the numbers.
So we've seen the vision and really believe in it. There's one other thing, and since we're running long anyway, let's make them stick with us and talk about how important it is to make sure you know how far every club in your bag goes.
Absolutely. So this whole concept of the playing yardage, where do you play, minimum, maximum playing yardage, and your miss, is something every player has to know. And that's why we've set up some programs here with our Flightscopes so that people can come by and they can spend, it takes a couple hours, because you got to go through every club in your bag. They go through it but you walk away knowing exactly what you need to do out on the golf course with every single club in your bag.
And we know if those clubs are performing well. We even get that Flightscope, that miracle of looking at the shaft in action if we want to, and see how the clubs actually work.
Absolutely.
That's a really nice thing.
The mystical acceleration curve, of which you're an expert.
Acceleration curve. So. What a week, huh?
Yeah, it's been great. So I'm really looking forward to our last week and our roundup. We're going to put them through the wedges again, and we're going to be working on consistency. One more thing when they're doing on the consistency, because we didn't have a specific target, we just had a yardage. What they were really trying to do, and what we were trying to look for them to do, was to tie into what did my swing feel like to produce that yardage. And that's also part of the nature of the feedback that we're getting from radar, and that's why it's so important. Again, something that I learned a long time ago at working with radar is when I got that shot-by-shot feedback, all of a sudden I could tie into what was going on with my swing, and my feel for what I was doing got way better. So did my consistency.
So the whole thing is, once you get the map drawn, then you just repeat that, and then all of a sudden you know how to do it.
And guess what?
Practice. If you know what you need to do, practice that.
Practice that. All right.
Good idea.
Hey, these are the Radar Chronicles. He's the mad scientist.
He's the professor.
We'll see you next week for our wrap-up of the Radar Chronicles study version, but we're going to keep going and tell you a lot more about how radar can benefit you in the future as well. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.